Hey folks, welcome to week 14. This month we're going to look at fruit. Now, a lot of you love drawing fruit, so this also makes me very happy to know we're drawing something that you enjoy. So in this one, we're going to look at a pear. It's a very classic thing to draw, so I wanted to make sure it was both realistic, classical, and also a tiny bit challenging. So our main challenge here is actually the texture, the speckled bits on the skin of the pear. There's also the curvature that we have to look for, but we've practiced that in a few things now. So grab your pencils and let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is our outline. You'll notice on the pear that it's not a circle. A circle would mean it's an apple. So on our pear, what we want to do is kind of start with one side and just think about the curves. Think of it as a nice juicy bum, and then we've just kind of got a small, I don't know, thing on top of it. But it might take a little bit of playing around with. As you can see, mine's not very good to start with, so I'm just slicing bits away from it, thinking, right, well, if I like the top, then I'll work on the bottom, or if I liked the shape on the bottom, then I'll change the top. So just spend a couple of minutes trying to get the shape of your pear similar to the image itself. Then we're just going to add the stem on the top. So this has a bend in it and it points towards the right hand side. So try not to make it straight because nature isn't very straight at all. It's very curved and bent and wiggly. So we want to make sure we are honoring that. And then what we're going to do to start is we're just going to add a base layer of shading. So this might seem rogue and you're probably like, what the hell, China? We've not done the leaf yet. But I kind of just want to go for it a little bit before we do anything else, just to kind of knock off the white and see if that affects anything in our drawing. So I'm even covering the little light patches on the pear as well, because I can either use a rubber to remove it or I can shade around it darker. So I'm just trying to play around with the shading and make sure it's all covered so it's got a nice even surface. Once you've done this, I want you to switch to your 8B pencil and you're just going to try to push this a little bit darker. So you're looking at where we have the darkest parts of the pear now. And we have a bit of a glow on the left-hand side, so I'm leaving a gap and then I'm adding my darker shadow. And just notice how soft I'm applying it. So this helps with creating soft edges. It means it's not too dark, and it's almost like a rehearsal stage, because sometimes when we draw we get nervous, especially with something like this where it's super organic and curvy. We're just not sure whether it's in the right place, so it's always good to kind of do a little practice bit, push it a little bit darker, and then go back and refine it. Now, you'll do the same on the right-hand side. So this is a wider gradient, and you want to make sure that you're pulling from that edge on the right and you're pushing it into the center on the left. Now, I can see on the pear, it's really dark on that absolute edge. So I'm trying to push that as dark as I'm feeling comfortable with for now. And you can start to see the curvature of the piece quite quickly. So what we're going to do now is just go over the left hand side. So again, we're trying to stretch that gradient from the left a little bit more into the right. So I'm basically leaving a lighter part of the pear in the center. I'm just like walking towards it from the left, from the right. So we're bringing our gradient towards the middle, and we're still being careful about it. Sometimes I'm like, right, fucking go for it. But this one I'm like, no, let's be careful. So it should look weird at this stage. Mine does. It doesn't look great. But we're starting to bring those shades together. So once we've done that, we start to join the shades around those little reflections. So just make sure you're paying attention to where the reflections are, and you can hopefully shade around them and you can start to see the glow. Now, I like to work on a piece like this in many different ways, but I'm often moving around it because I'm trying to find this balance. So I might notice at the top, oh, it's a little bit light compared to the bottom. Or I might notice that the bottom should be darker because it's in shadow. So I only kind of notice these things sometimes when I'm in it. So if you're like, hold on, weren't we just doing the highlights? Why are we doing the bottom? It's because I'm trying to find that balance. So don't be afraid to move around your pear as well to find that the connection between all the shades and pushing things darker. You can see that the highlights now are starting to come more forward, but it does need a lot of work still. So there's a lot of graininess that's happening. So once I've finished with my dark shading, I'm going to go over it in my lighter pencil. So when you're at a point when you've kind of mapped out where your highlights are, where your shadows are, and where your dark bits are, I want you to grab your 2B and just go over the whole thing, because what this does is it goes inside those little white pockets of paper, and it's starting to push your shadows a bit darker, but it's doing it in a gentle way. So you're going over the whole piece except your highlights, and it's also helping you to kind of carve those shapes in a little bit better. So go in different directions, see if you can push your drawing a little bit more just with your 2B, and then we can push it further with our darker pencil. So we're switching between the two now. We're trying to see, okay, where can I push it? Where can I refine it? And this is what makes a drawing better than how it started, which is a very weird thing to say. You're basically trying to just sketch up your shape. You're trying to put everything in place, and then the detail comes in. So you'll see that I'm pushing darker now with my 8B on that edge, and it's quite powerful to have these medium grays and then push a really dark shade in there. So make sure that you're looking at your shadows and thinking, right, can I go a little bit darker here? Will that make it more realistic? And probably the answer is yes, is keeping that gap between the darker bits and the lighter bits. And I think I go on about this all the time, but it's so important. And you can see that on mine. It's working, it's starting to pop really realistically. And soon it's time for the extra bits of detail. So when you're ready, move on to your stem. Now, with something like this, I like to just throw in those dark wrinkly bits in my darker pencil, and then just go over it in a light shade, and pretty much that's all you need to do. It's quite an effective little method. And once we've done that, we're going to start working on our leaf. So it's actually quite nice sometimes to have a part of your drawing that's in a really good state before you add the next bit. Some artists do this. They just draw everything as they mean to go on, but in this case, we have kind of done a big shape and then built it up. But some artists do literally like a millimeter squared, finish that, move on to the next millimeter. So this is a bit of a compromise. It's right, let's do one shape, finish it ish, and then do another shape and finish that ish. So we're on to our leaf. Now, the most important thing is trying to get that dark shadow where the leaf sits behind the pear. So make sure you have that, because we need to show that there's a glow on the pear. And that glow is shown by being surrounded by darker shades. So add that onto your leaf. And to be honest, it doesn't matter if your leaf is perfectly identical to the pear. You could just draw a classic leaf shape and it will still look great. But it does have these veiny bits. So I tend to add a sort of medium grey behind. And then I'll use my dark pencil to kind of shade around the veins. This is a really easy technique to show that there are veins. So give that a go and see how it works. Just maybe watch how I do it, and then you'll be able to apply it to yours. So it's leaving the vein with the undershade and then going around the darker bits with your dark pencil to highlight it. And it's a nice way to do a leaf without being like, how do I get all of the chlorophylls? Which some pictures do have it. Very stressful. Anyway, it's really starting to come together now. We could leave it here and that would still be a great pair, but I still think these things can be pushed. So let's add a shadow on the ground. It's really dark right under the pear, and we're going to add a very thin, very thin shadow underneath. It is an oval underneath, but sometimes people draw massive circles because we know if we were stood above it, it would be a circle. However, we're stood in front of it, which means it's an oval. So draw a thin shadow underneath, make it super dark beneath the pear, and then a bit lighter around it. So now it's sitting on something, and we always like to see our drawing sat on something. It's very, I don't know, it's quite important for drawings, so it's not floating, especially a still life like this. Now, the next part is one of the final touches. So we're actually adding the little speckles on the pear. These are not just loads of dashes. They're actually lots of individual circles, ovals. We have different sizes. We've got small dots, bigger dots. We've got dark ones, light ones. We've got areas where they're more condensed. So you could easily ruin all the work you've done just by jabbing a bunch of dots in there. Or you could just spend a bit of time and add some extra ones that are carefully placed and considered for the size and the darkness of it. So it does make a huge difference. Now, the final bit, if you want to push it even further, because like me, you're a perfectionist, it's just never done, is it? Like, oh, how far do I push this? You can grab your 2H pencil. This pencil is to help make it extra smooth, especially if your paper is a little bit grainy like mine, or your 8B has made this texture. It's just to help get in those little pockets and smooth everything out. The good thing about 2H is it never goes super dark, so you'll not be in danger of ruining what you've done. If anything, it just brings the shades together and it makes for a super smooth piece of pear, or pear. It's not a piece, it's a pear. So there we have it. Well done on your pear. Do feel free to share your artwork with me. I'd love to see it. And I hope you enjoyed that. And next week, we're going to continue the theme on fruit. Have a good week, folks, and I'll see you for our next lesson.